Veteran Black Panther political prisoner and journalist Mumia Abu Jamal, who's been imprisoned in the United States for almost 40 years, was expected to undergo heart surgery this Thursday after being rushed to hospital with chest pains over the weekend. His supporters held an emergency press conference to demand that he be allowed to call his wife a medical consultant, as he has been held incommunicado for the past 4 days. They also demanded that he not be shackled to his bed, as was the case the last time he was hospitalized. Mumia suffers from several pre-existing conditions and became ill with COVID-19 in the Mahoney State Correctional Institution, losing 30 pounds. Mumia Abu Jamal was tried, convicted and sentenced to death in 1982 for the murder of Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner. For the next 30 years, he was held in isolation on death row. He was kept there for over 10 years, even though a federal judge ordered his death sentence be overturned in 2001. Mumia remains in prison under a sentence of life without parole. The trial against him failed to meet international standards and was politically biased, taking place in a context that prevented him from receiving an impartial and fair hearing.
Prosecutors then agreed in 2011 to a sentence of life without parole. Judge Tucker's decision on Thursday was split because he denied Abu Jamal's claim.
And joining us to discuss the campaign for Mumia Abu Jamal's release, we now welcome his medical consultant, Dr. Ricardo Alvarez. Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Ricardo, what can you tell us about Mumia's current state of health and the conditions in which he's being held?
Let me first say that I have not had access to another medical provider. We had several demands. One of those demands was met in that there was communication with his wife, Wadia, and his strong spiritual advisor and supporter, Pam Africa. I have as yet not been able to speak directly with a medical provider, but it's my understanding that he is going to be undergoing heart surgery. It's likely going to be a procedure in which they're going to have to do a bypass graft. This will likely be an open heart surgery. So it's important to say that the conditions of his health are directly rooted in conditions of incarceration. One of the principles in medicine is that we allow those who are undergoing procedures and are in ill health to be able to consult with their loved ones and other medical consultants. That standard has not been met. We did not hear from him for many days.
Dr. Ricardo, for any of our viewers who are unfamiliar with the details of the case, could you explain the context in which Mumia was tried and convicted?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you and all the viewers and your interest in Mumia's case. Mumia's case is fundamentally a story of a deep suffering that has occurred at the hands of the state. Specifically, from the medical evidence, in 1981, when Mumia was picked up, this was at a time of great corruption through the city of Philadelphia. In fact, the federal government, the corruption was so bad, the federal government was doing a investigation just of the Philadelphia police. 15 of the 35 police officers involved in Mumia's case were in fact indicted for corruption. So at the time he was picked up, he was physically beaten. His head was rammed into a pole. He was brought to the hospital 1/2 hour later. He suffered a gunshot wound which lodged near his spine through his lungs. And when he got there, there's medical testimony documenting that he was with a medical doctor all the time. There was false testimony of a confession that was remembered 2 months later. So when we look at Mumia's case, this is an example of a level of violence that's occurring through the court system, which is basically rubber stamped a level of corruption. The primary targets for us in terms of changing this are the district attorney of Philadelphia, who's supposedly progressive, but is accepting this guilty verdict, and the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the largest union in the country with regard to incarceration. They have 355,000 members. They're very politically powerful, and they've basically taken the position they want Mumia dead no matter what.
Dr. Ricardo, what are the next steps in the struggle for Mumia's release and to clear his name once and for all?
Yes. So what we're understanding is that within the district attorney, the appeals process has allowed this case to go forward, and the district attorney has taken the position that he will defend the conviction and considers Mumia guilty. From the medical arena, we're linking with journalists, we're linking with lawyers. And what we're doing is we're basically challenging that district attorney. Most of the pressure, as I said, is coming from the Fraternal Order of the Police. And when we link together, what we want to do is challenge a narrative that says Mumia violently resisted arrest and that Mumia, in fact, boasted a confession. There's direct medical evidence contradicting that. And then what we want to do is present this from a place of defense of Mumia's life, that it must be acknowledged that he was beaten, brutalized, and that there's perjured testimony for a confession. Then all of the other evidence we believe will fall by the side after we establish this. And concurrently, there's also other legal strategies to move for bail to release him, and other legal strategies to move for a complete release of his conviction. The danger is that they will use the court system to extend this on and on and on until he dies in prison. He will likely receive repeated hospitalizations given the severity of his multiple conditions. And when he's hospitalized, it is a policy to be shackled. This is an acceptable policy in the United States. We have the highest rates of incarceration. Over 2 million people, it's higher than any modern society by far, and much of that population is our elders. So when we discuss Mumia's case, we link it to other political prisoners, and we also link it to release of our elders and moving towards abolition.
Dr. Ricardo Alvarez speaking to us there from the United States. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for bringing that insight into the case against Mumia Abu Jamal. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much.